Hey class, my name is Zoe Komen and today I'm going to be presenting on the Annie Dookhan Crime Lab scandal. So I'm going to be using the ISO IEC 17025 3rd edition. These are the requirements for competence of testing and calibration and forensic laboratories. And like I said, I'm going to be covering the Annie Dookhan Crime Lab scandal, and I'm going to be going over 6 major requirements of this ISO standard that her and her laboratory failed, which led to the arrest of Annie Dookhan and the entire shutdown of the Hinton State Laboratory Institute. So for the first one, I have the ISO IEC standard 7812, and this reads, the results shall be provided accurately, clearly, unambiguously, and objectively, usually in a report, example, a test report or a calibration certificate, or report of sampling, and shall include all of the information agreed with the customer and necessary for the interpretation of results and all the information required by the method used. All issued reports shall be retained as technical records. So Annie Dookhan failed to abide by this standard because she willingly provided false results for her testing. She failed to accurately follow procedures. She would dry lab her samples. So she would take samples and she would say that she tested them when she actually didn't test them. And then she would also turn her negative samples positive. So she would take a known drug, such as cocaine, and put them into her samples to make positive reports. And this affected the governance because her falsifying results led to inaccurate testing and procedures, which ultimately harmed the laboratory's reputation and accreditation. For my second one, I put ISO standard 621. All personnel of the laboratory, either internal or external, that could influence the laboratory activities shall act impartially, be competent, and work in accordance with the laboratory's management system. So she pretty much failed all 3 of these. She did not act impartially, competently, or work in accordance with the laboratory's management system. Again, she took out samples from the evidence safe without proper authority, and she did this by signing for different evidence officers, which is very illegal. And she, again, dry labbed and turned her negative samples into positive samples. So this impacted the governance by falsifying test results and not working with management to accurately abide by procedures. She also lost credibility for the lab by signing other employees' names to check out this evidence. For my next one, I wrote the iOS standard 7217, which states, deviations from methods for all laboratory activities shall occur only if the deviation has been documented, technically justified, authorized, and accepted by the customer. She severely deviated from all of the methods and procedures when she tested results, and none of it was authorized. No one actually even really knew about it, except for, you'll see in a little bit. Later they found out. She stated in an interview, I got the work done, but not properly. I didn't follow the procedures, and that was wrong. She would take many samples from the evidence, and she would group them together by what drug she thought the sample contained, and she would just look at them. She wouldn't actually test them. She would just group them together. And then she sent them off to mass spectrometry for analysis, and a lot of the times it was sent back because they were incorrectly identified. And this affects the governance because she deliberately ignored procedures put into place by the laboratory, and she incorrectly identified and tested samples. And this led to incorrect procedures and resulting in harm to the reputation of the laboratory. For my next one, I put the iOS standard 623. The laboratory shall ensure that the personnel have the competence to perform laboratory activities for which they are responsible and to evaluate the significance of deviations. The laboratory failed to ensure that Dookhan had the competence to perform these laboratories, and they also failed to document the correct educational background that Annie Dookhan had. She claimed that she had a master's degree in chemistry from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, but this was later found out false, and she lied. on her resume as well as under oath. She did not evaluate Dookhan's, or the laboratory did not evaluate Dookhan's deviations from proper methods either, which I'll be talking about on the next slide. And this affected governance because the laboratory had personnel working that was not qualified to work and test these samples, and she did not have the skills and the expertise that she claimed that she did have. So for my next one for ISO standards, I put 7811. The results shall be reviewed and authorized prior to release. Annie Dookhan's management failed to follow these standards. Annie Dookhan claimed to test over 500 samples a month, which is 5 times the normal testing. And the superiors heard complaints and they ignored these. So the colleagues and the superiors never saw her actually in front of a microscope, and the management failed to review Dookhan's results because of this. And this effect on governance is the failure of management to review Dookhan's reports led to inadequate testing and results. They failed management risks and intentionally ignored odd behavior. For my last one, I wrote the iOS standard 794. The laboratory receiving the complaint shall be responsible for gathering and verifying all necessary information to validate the complaint. Annie Dookhan's colleagues complained to management on multiple times, but the management did not properly investigate these complaints. So an example of this would be in 2010, the Annie Dookhan supervisor reviewed her work and concluded that her results were adequate. They did not test any of her results. They just stated this. And so this had a huge effect on governance, which inadequate management reviews led to ignoring complaints and red flags, which ultimately lowered the validity of the laboratory and eventually led to a complete shutdown of the laboratory and eventually led to Annie Dookhan being arrested as well. And they should have just listened to these complaints, made sure that they validated them and found out this sooner instead of letting it go on for so long. And these are my references. Thank you.